All right, I wanted to take a video. That's probably not often, or too often, you get up here. So I want to take a video and kind of show you what I'm looking at up here. It's a little easier to describe while I'm kind of going around rather than trying to point out pictures. So what you see is stuff like this, and that's actually a nail. You can kind of see the edge of the nail there sticking out when I push down on it. So it was nailed underneath, and that nail has worked itself loose, you know, kind of like these, and this one right here, if it'll focus. You know, I'm seeing a couple. That one right there, same thing. I'm seeing a couple of those around. So those are called nail pops. Obviously not hail related. You know, when hail weathers out, when it first hits a house, it shows these black marks, these prominent black marks, because it exposes fresh asphalt. And over time they kind of weather out. Like this piece of shingle right here, you know, a lot of the granules have fallen off, but you can hardly tell when you're, you know, far back kind of scanning like this, because it's weathered to the same, you know, relatively to the same color as the shingle. And this is the side that we've determined that the hail came from, because you've got marks. The hail came from this way, coming back towards us. There's marks on the fence to this side of the house. The gate over here on this side looks newer, so it was probably replaced recently. But there's hail marks on this side of the fence, but not on this side, not on that side, and not on this side of your backyard fence. So that tells me it came pretty much straight back towards the back of the house. So this would be the most exposed slope because it's straight back here. And I'm not seeing a whole lot. There is some pretty old hail. I found one that, oh, here it is. So this one's really hard to see, but it's showing this kind of, let me put a shadow on it. There's this kind of exposed fiberglass. And that's what happens to real old hail. Hail will make a mark, do damage to the shingle, and then over time weather will just start taking, you know, pieces of the granules out and weathering the asphalt out. So, you know, there's some stuff that could possibly be hail, but it's very light. You know, sometimes I'll recommend to wait on hail when it's not presenting itself, because the damage it can tend to show up over time. This looks like it's had a year or two to show up, and there's some spots I'm seeing on here. You know, there's another one right here. It's just really hard to see because it has weathered and turned back into the same color as the shingle. So it's a toss-up. I do think you have at least a shot at getting them to pay a claim, depending on your deductible. That's another big thing, is if you've got a big $5,000 deductible, then it may not be worth it to try to claim. I think 3 sides of the house look like hail damage, because then it won't go over your deductible. But if I can get somebody to look at this roof and say, yeah, you know, I do see the old spots, they're not bad, but it's hail damage, then it might be worth it. But if you've got a $500 deductible or $1,000, then it'd be worth it just on the paint alone. So, you know, here on this side you've got some weathering, granules falling off, but doesn't look like blatant hail. This roof is pretty old. I mean, it's the original roof to the house. You can definitely see that. You know, kind of in the sunlight, you can kind of see more of the shininess. That's the fiberglass of the shingle showing through after it gets weathered enough. So there again, that might have been an old hail 10 years ago that has weathered to that point. And some hail is worse than others. Sometimes you get that immediately after a hailstorm. Sometimes it takes a while, but that looks pretty old. So I think you do have a somewhat legitimate claim, or not a somewhat legit, you have a legitimate claim for at least your paint be pretty tough to get this roof bought by insurance, only because of it's kind of old, and the length of time it's been since it was hit by hail, probably a couple years. It might be a little tough to get this covered, but it's definitely worth a shot when you're talking about, you know, this is probably at least a $10,000 roof. It's worth a shot. It does need to be done. It's pretty weathered. These things are supposed to last. When they first came out with this style of roof, it's a dimensional roof. It was built as a 30-year roof, so it's supposed to last 30 years. It's not that old, but it's there again. You know, when in certain light you can see the fiberglass showing, you know, reflecting off of the edge of the shingles, and it's kind of like your siding with the paint. The edges get worn quicker. That's what you're seeing here. The edges of the shingles get worn quicker, and the ridge cap as well. See some shininess in the ridge cap. So the ridge cap is getting worn. You got one that's ripped. It's not too big of a deal, but it's getting there. It's probably going to need to be replaced in the next, you know, year or so at the most, to prevent any kind of, you know, leaking going on. I've got some gutter issues while I'm up here. I think it was this edge right here. It was leaking on the corner. That needs to be fixed. Gutters, I mean, they're steel gutters, so they don't look rusted or anything. Maybe a little bit of rust a little further down there. Other than that, steel gutters last a pretty long time. So just some maintenance stuff going on. But there is some signs of old hail, so, you know, legitimate claim as far as the paint. I think that you've got at least some say there to say that hail caused some of that damage to the paint, and then you've got some signs of some old hail up here, but that just depends on whether or not the adjuster's having a good day or not. This is another kind of telltale thing. These metals are very soft on these vents, and so they show, you know, where hail hits the most, and you can kind of gauge the size of the hail based off of how badly these things are beat up. So it's definitely beaten. It's not the worst I've seen, which is kind of reflective of what I'm seeing on the roof. It's pretty light. It's there, but it's light, and that's what I'm seeing on this cap. It's there, but it's light. So, you know, it's one of those right in between, where it's not a slam dunk like immediately when you pop your head up on the roof, oh my gosh, it's destroyed. You know, there's hail damage everywhere, but it's not there. So it's in between, and I think it's worth at least having your adjuster out here. You can't get penalized for calling them out at least once. If they come out and don't pay for anything, it can reflect badly, but usually it's, you know, 2 or 3 claims that you call and nothing happens, that they start getting after you. So if you haven't called any claims, then there's not much to worry about. And like I say, it's right in that gray area where I'd say, you know, since you need a roof pretty soon anyway, it might be worth taking the shot. So anyway, if you have any other questions, let me know. Thanks.